Welcome to the second breakout session here at Dial Square. Our next breakout session speaker is talking about securing today's applications. From F5, please welcome Richard Bible.
Good afternoon, everyone. So before I started, I just wanted to give a special mention to one of my colleagues at F5, who's an account manager on the ground with all of you Rackspaces here in the UK, who gave me a call last week and said, "Hey, Rich, do you want to come down to a Rackspace event in London? It's going to be a cool venue. There's be lots of networking, all the rest of it. It'll be fantastic." I said, "Yeah, no worries, mate. I'll come down and join your little party." Then he goes, "Oh, by the way, do you mind if you do a little presentation? Nothing serious, a little breakout room, a few slides. It'll be easy as pie." So this morning when I walked in, I said, "Oh, Brooksy, can you come and show me the room that I'm presenting in?" He drags me down here, and I'm like, "Brooksy, you've properly stitched me up here, mate." So needless to say, despite all of that, thanks everyone for joining this session. It's lovely to be here. And I'm going to take you through F5's view on securing today's applications and how we view the world in this side of things. So it wouldn't be a presentation without some statistics, but I wanted to give a little bit of context to these statistics, especially considering these are key drivers in how F5 has shaped their strategy and what they've delivered to the market, and how we can actually address these different key trends that we're seeing inside the marketplace. So I actually did a talk 2 weeks ago on Cloud Federation. So for us, even in small to medium enterprise customers that we deal with or partners, we're seeing a massive uptake in software as a service applications and moving to the cloud, as you guys will probably all be aware. But what you may not know is that these enterprises have between 100 to 200 unknown software as a service applications that have been spun up by different business units. So I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that with these unknown applications, there's a whole raft of inherent security issues that can come from these complete unknowns. And then the proliferation of mobile devices is absolutely staggering, and it's going to continue to rise. So it'll be interesting to see here today who has 2 mobile devices, whether it's corporate or your own device. Raise your hands. 3 or more? So probably 20% of the room like that. And this is a trend that we're going to see continue. And it's a clear driver for enterprises to be able to increase productivity from their workforce. But obviously, there's some serious security risks that come from bringing your own device or even managing your own corporate devices. So we're going to see that continue to rise. And then, the buzzword of the industry, APTs. These are real serious threats and challenges that our customers and partners have to deal with day in, day out. And these are continuing to rise, especially everything around SSL. Anything to do with malware, anything with SQL injection or web-based attacks. And to give you a little bit of an idea, and I may get in trouble for actually talking about this, but F5 did their own internal test of our employees by doing a fake spear phishing attack. Who can guess the number of people that actually clicked on the link and went through that process? Pretty close, actually. Yeah, it was 25% of our organization clicked on the link, which is a pretty scary figure, realistically. So if you think about a legal firm or someone else that's not in high tech, this is going to be significantly higher. So very, very serious threats. And then this is probably going to be something that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years. Any sort of security architecture has been growing organically. You've built up from your traditional firewalls into web gateways, into WAFs, into whatever else security appliances that you've got part of that infrastructure. And in a lot of cases, these have been built over time, point solutions, et cetera. So most of the companies that we're working with today have at least 5 or more inside their infrastructure, continually growing. And they're looking to F5 to be able to help with what they've put in place and consolidate that and bring together a unique story. So we had a fairly large marketing change about 2 years ago, and I'm a technical person, so I don't really care about the marketing side of things. And this was our synthesis launch. But as part of that, one of the best pieces that come out of it was our reference architectures. These are robust white paper deployment guides, explaining different verticals, different use cases like denial of service, and enterprise management mobility. And as part of that, we've put together this two-tiered architecture for security deployment. So what does that look like in your day-to-day operation? These are all going to be typical applications, software as a service or on-premise, your standard type of stuff. And then out in the wild, you're going to have your laptops, your tablets, mobile devices, whatever it might be. And these guys could be with inside the infrastructure, coming externally, contractors, whoever they might be. So at some point, these are going to be used for productivity, for day-to-day operations, whatever your line of business requires for you to actually operate and be an organization. So how do these actually come together and allow you to access these in a secure method? Well, we look at a two-tiered architecture. So the first side of things, we're going to look at the perimeter, and how these guys are authenticated or authorized or allowed access through to these applications. And this might be through an SSL VPN. It might be through to CRM, that requires SAML authentication through Cloud Federation. It might be making sure they're available and fast through that security architecture. But it also might be securing your internal users for that traffic that they're going outbound so that you don't have these APTs, malware, infecting that internal infrastructure. And then we look at the applications in a much deeper way and closer to the application and getting specific to what you're looking at within inside a network stack. So within inside F5, we look at that in a couple of different pieces. It's your traditional layer 3, layer 4 firewall. Again, you've got your traffic management in there, which local traffic manager and global traffic manager have been best of breed F5 products for 5 to 10 years. And then also looking very tightly at the web application. So looking at a web application firewall and how you secure that application within inside its premise. And then probably one of the hottest topics around security is denial of service mitigation. And that's either whether it's at layer 2, 3, 4, or even layer 7. And I'll split these out and show you guys how F5 looks at putting together this two-tiered architecture and how it's made up with inside our portfolio. So it's kind of split into 4 sections or 4 product offerings that F5 has here. So since the launch of our TMOS platform, which is our operating system, it runs on all of the appliances, whether it's hardware or software, or our chassis, whatever it might be. We've had a proxy architecture, and this has been the mainstay of how we've been able to create the breadth of feature set that we've got with inside either local load balancing or global load balancing. And the brilliance of this is that once we had this technology in place, it allowed us to be able to create additional use cases and functionality above and beyond load balancing. And one of these is part of our web application firewall. And the proxy is absolutely essential for being able to understand and protect these applications and be visible of what's actually coming through the infrastructure. So we've got a couple of little ways of looking at this, and I'll touch on the DDoS and network firewall in a little bit more detail. But that's going to be your front-end piece before it comes into the closer to the application. Inside our operating system, we have built-in mitigation for SYN floods, etc. We're able to apply SYN cookies, whatever else it might be. So this is for your layer 2, layer 3 piece. Inside the proxy, we're then going to look at how we're securing SSL. And what we're seeing in the industry recently is there's been an absolute rapid rise in the attacks that we have against OpenSSL or the SSL protocol with Heartbleed, Poodle, Beast, whatever else it might be. So F5 has worked tirelessly to be able to look at that, secure our SSL stack, but also have that as a front-end barrier for anything that you're presenting externally, whether it's a web service or whatever it might be. And on the back of that, and I don't know what everyone's knowledge around F5 is, but iRules has been our extensible tool set to be able to do something custom outside of our product for a unique need based on a scripting language. And so with inside SSL, for instance, with Heartbleed, before we had a fix with inside the product, our user community had produced this iRule, which is 2 or 3 lines. In about 2 or 3 hours after this, went into the public forum. So it's an absolute, fantastic tool set to be able to look outside the box and what could be done with inside F5. And over the years, we've absolutely been at the forefront of load balancing, HTTP being clearly the priority of that. So we have the wealth of knowledge that we've built and matured over years and years of being the leaders with inside this space. HTTP, obviously very key to web security. So understanding this traffic, giving it context, being able to differentiate between a real request, which is going to the web server, or something that is possibly a slow post or slow LORIS. With inside the security space, other technologies like IDS, IPS, they don't have that context, or maybe even can't unwrap the SSL, so they don't have the same visibility. These are very difficult to detect because they have the same look and feel as a normal HTTP request. So we've built in that technology, that understanding, to be able to detect and mitigate and report on what's happening at the HTTP level. Again, being extensible with iRules. So then we look at, perhaps a little bit deeper. I don't know if anyone knows or if you guys are familiar with the OWASP Top 10, the Open Web Application Security Project. These guys are the leaders in talking to the industry about what developers should be coding for and protecting with inside their application. And they release a top 10 of what they see as the most relevant threats. So SQL injection, always at the top of the list, by far the most damaging. So we've put together a configuration mechanism to be able to protect against that OWASP top 10, SQL injection included, and that's built into the Application Security Manager WAF product. But it's not all about what's coming inbound. There's certainly a lot of guys trying to do SQL injection, cross-site scripting, all of that typical web attack type stuff. But what if it is misconfigured, heaven forbid, or if you have a service that doesn't have the WAF turned on or something like that? There needs to be a way to prevent sensitive information from returning back out of your infrastructure. So we have functionality built in to look at data leakage prevention, understand whether credit cards are being removed from the back-end infrastructure, looking at PCI security and securing that. But it can look at anything that's actually leaving your organization and anything that is sensitive for your specific application or your business. And then finally, for our banking and finance customers, fraud with inside online banking, et cetera, has become big business for a lot of bad guys out there. So F5 made an acquisition about 9 to 12 months ago now, which was a company called Versafe. We've now renamed that to WebSafe, and it's obviously coupled very tightly with the Web Application Firewall because you're protecting that online banking service. But actually, you can have this independently, and it's there for the types of malware or proxies out in the internet that are able to grab the credentials of online banking customers. So in combination with the WAF and being able to prevent anti-fraud with inside online banking, they've put together a pretty collective online protection for the absolute layer 7 security of applications. Don't know what that line does. So I mentioned the OWASP Top 10. It's part of that. I think it's number 3 or number 4 is weak authentication. And it goes without saying, regardless of whether you're publishing an application remotely to the internet, something internal, software as a service application, whatever you're requiring your user to access from whatever location to whatever destination, having proper authentication controls or access methodologies, is absolutely key to making sure that the correct user from the correct device has the right access to get to that exact resource. So if you've been following F5 or known about F5 for long enough, we actually had a SSL VPN product called FirePass. And FirePass, we decided to rip out all the good features and bring that into the Big IP family. And we decided to call that Access Policy Manager. And the beauty about that was that we could take advantage of all of the bespoke hardware that we've created, so all of our appliances, chassis, whatever else it is, and everything that we've built into the operating system. So whether it's SSL offloading, whether it's the caching, compression, the intelligence in iRules. And then we've made that into, today, the industry's most scalable access technology. But it's not just about access, because what I've seen, and I've been at F5 for nearly 11 years now, working with FirePass and everything else as we go along. The way that people and organizations consume SSL VPN, it's a commodity. Everyone has one, and that's just a little piece of what you do for your security technology. So what we did is we made it flexible enough to create policies that are not just around SSL VPN and remote access. You can apply them to anything that you're load balancing. So it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's an application, whether it's VMware, whether it's Citrix, whether it's Office 365 in the cloud, or whether it's your own homegrown web server. Regardless of what that is, you're able to put your own controls in place, set policies of how these applications can be accessed and who can access them when, etc. You're able to layer on SAML to do federation between those applications in the cloud, and whether maybe it might even be your own private cloud, it doesn't matter to us. And then also, something that's very key to the security within inside the organization is outbound access. So having a web gateway similar to Bluecoat, which is one of our competitors, or Squid Proxy, etc. These are being combined so that you've got authenticated access outbound and authenticated access within inside your infrastructure. Along with that, there's being able to detect malware and also antivirus that's passing in between this infrastructure. So if you've got a set of employees that maybe are not very tech savvy, then making sure that you've got enough mitigation techniques in place to be able to get around their lesser understanding of how security works, then Access Policy Manager is going to be able to provide that protection along with the authentication and AAA access. Okay, so I kind of made it so that it's moving down the stack. So we looked at the in-depth web application firewalling, looking at securing the applications. Then flip side, the authentication piece and how that access is granted inside the infrastructure or to the applications that you're trying to get to. And then we would typically look at lower levels. So I've probably had over 1,000 questions at F5 saying, oh, you guys do something other than load balancing, and this is probably another one of them. And this is actually on the portfolio at Rackspace, so you can take this as a customer or partner today, Advanced Firewall Manager. And historically, we actually had many, many customers using our load balancing product as a firewall, because by default, it denies all. So you only open up ports and IPs that you're going to use for load balancing. So we thought, well, if people are actually using us for this, and it's performant and scalable, you're not going to kill the state table like you would with a checkpoint or something else, why not make this into a product? Put a GUI in place, certify it, do all the reporting and logging, and make it a really cool performance scalable firewall. So we did. So we called it Advanced Firewall Manager. And it's kind of split into two sections, actually. So there's your typical Layer 3, Layer 4 firewall. And then also what we've done is try to make an industry-leading Layer 2 to Layer 4 denial of service appliance. And we've done a pretty good job at that. And all of what you see is possible on one single appliance or virtual edition or chassis. You take an operating system, and you can license or use or provision, however you want to talk about it, any of these functions, or all of them if you want. It's whatever is the requirement for your infrastructure. So if you roll that all in very slowly, so that kind of what makes up AFM. There's a lot of organizations that will just have a layer 3, 4 firewall. Then behind that, they'll have a load balancer. Then behind that, they'll have some sort of authentication system, like maybe IBM Tivoli or SiteMinder or whatever it might be. Then behind that, they might have Imperva or F5 for a WAF, et cetera, et cetera. So you can quickly see, especially in a managed service environment, that if these functions are collapsed, and it may not have to actually be on one appliance. So when I talk about this, a lot of people will say, oh, that's a pretty big security no-no if you've got all of those functions in one place. And I completely agree. But what it isn't is if you've got these split into zones, perhaps you've got your front-end perimeter firewall in the DMZ, you've got your authentication back inside a trusted zone. What it is it's one support, it's one skill set and knowledge set with one type of vendor. I'm pretty comfortable that Cisco wouldn't have all of their stuff in one single 6500 chassis. So for customers that are looking at F5, looking at the product set that they've put through, there's some massive advantages in consolidation and how we would implement this security architecture. And in terms of how we delivered AFM, it's again built on our bespoke hardware, our operating system, so you can use all of the features that are in LTM. It can be combined with the authentication features of APM, so that you can authenticate users that are coming through that firewall. And it's massive scale. I mean, we're looking at 640 gig in the top end chassis, and the state table is millions and millions and millions and millions, and there's no one in this market that can compete with us in terms of performance and scale. And then, there's so much inside the industry around protection around DDoS. Actually, I think it was a week or two ago, F5 had a ransom note for a denial of service against our own infrastructure. So, it's not just banks, it's not just financial institutions. Pretty much anyone, that either gets on a hit list or does something to, pee off some of the, anonymous guys out there, is a potential target for this type of thing. So, having a robust scale infrastructure to protect against DDoS, not only, on-premise, but also in the cloud, it's absolutely essential to being able to look after that infrastructure. Right, and then the forgotten friend of security. And almost always when I talk about security and present to customers and partners across EMEA, DNS is usually the last piece of the puzzle or the last thing that they think about when they're securing an architecture. And what relies on DNS? Everything. So really, this should probably be the first thing that that customers should be looking at when they're putting together some sort of security compliance or architecture design. And so you know it as GTM, and F5 decided to call it DNS. I don't make that decision, but it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think really it's because they moved out of global server load balancing. Or not moved out, but they expanded significantly on the use cases that GTM can handle. So it kind of didn't cover everything as well as they would have liked. And if you use GTM day in, day out today, I would suspect that most of these are probably a surprise that you can actually do with that appliance and with that functionality. And a lot of the times, the consolidation story rings true. So I know a lot of people that will have DNS Firewall specifically just in front of their DNS infrastructure. Well, if you're doing that in front of a global load balancer, why not have DNS Firewall and a global load balancer as a single appliance? So we brought out a feature called DNS Express, and that allows the box to be able to cope with millions and millions of DNS requests per second based on the hardware that we use, etc. And that's able to sit there and protect and mitigate those DDoS attacks with inside DNS infrastructure. Then it's all the normal stuff. We look at the DNS validation of protocols. For instance, there was the Spam House attack, which was a massive DNS reflection attack in 2013. And if you had some sort of tool or something like GTM in place to be able to limit the amount of queries that were done against server records or text records, then that would never have taken place. So being able to understand DNS know the protocol and be able to set limits on what's happening in your infrastructure would have prevented that and anything future anything in the future that we don't know about yet. And then also we've rolled in a subscription service from Webroot, which is an IP reputation database, and that can be used across any of the product suites. But it seems to ring very well true with DNS and with GTM, so that you can set and look up this database, see what the source IP address is, and say, yep, this is a known bad IP address. I'm not going to serve that DNS record. So you can kind of get rid of 80% of the noise of what would be coming through your DNS infrastructure, dismiss that, and then take care of everything else that you should be serving. So not only can you collapse features and functions and actual physical hardware and consolidate, but you might minimize future spend on DNS infrastructure, whether that's primary or secondary DNS servers or whatever it might be. So we've seen that quite common inside the industry. We've ICASA certified the DNS Firewall, AFM, APM. So we've put a lot of work into getting industry recognition and accreditation on what we've put forward to become a credible security company. And then also, this isn't a mandate yet, but it's starting to become something that you'll have to look at if you're outside of the government or military in the US, where it is mandatory to have DNS security for any responses that you're handing out. So DNS security or DNSSEC is a standard where you're signing the zone or the answer that you're handing out for that zone. So when you sign it, it's a two-way trust relationship so that the IP address that you're handing out for that host name is what it is. And there is no way that that could have been cache poisoned or tampered with before you get that response. So GTM, you can easily configure that in a couple of clicks, and it covers that security requirement for you. So why would anyone outside of the F5 community look at us as a security vendor? Well, what we've done is spent over a decade creating and crafting and maturing our local load balancing, local traffic manager product, building a secure, scalable proxy, and becoming the market leaders in the ADC. And what we've realized is that because of the unique strategic position of where F5 appliances are placed, it puts us in the perfect area for where security, controls, reporting, and context can be gained from. So if you would ask any of your customers, or if I was to ask anyone here, pretty much all of your traffic would more or less traverse an F5. And if that's the case, you're able to apply firewall rules, or you're able to apply authentication mechanisms, or you're able to do web security. So it's a very unique position for us, and we've built very robust, scalable hardware that's bespoke to our operating system, and giving you guys the ability to expand outside of the load balancing, global or local, that we've been doing over the last 10 years. Again, this a marketing term that's been handed down to us, but they've decided to call it the application delivery firewall. So we have to kind of run with that, but in layman's terms, for me, this basically says you've got a absolutely fantastic firewall offering that is able to be used in combination with the ADC functionality from LTM and GTM. And it's a unique selling point for us. It's something that we're able to use all of the features that we've built over the last 10 years in combination with a firewall, which is something that some of our competitors can do, but nowhere near in the maturity, the scale that we're able to bring to the market. And the way that we look at it, as I was explaining before, security is not really a consolidation piece that you can take into one little appliance and go, yep, there's everything that you need to be able to look after your infrastructure. There's so many other use cases outside of that. But being able to look at a vendor, look at their support, look at the skill set that you have with inside Rackspace or your customer and partner community, and being able to make a consolidated play rather than consolidation in terms of minimizing infrastructure then this passes on a massive amount of savings and lets you guys be able to have a huge return on investment in terms of how you're putting this together. And then finally, we spoke about iRules. So the online user community for this is Dev Central. If you've not seen it, it is an absolutely brilliant resource. There's over 150,000 people that are part of this community. It's posted on and moderated by our actual developers inside Seattle and San Jose. And if you've ever written an iRule, which I haven't in the last 5 years, because pretty much anything that I've needed to do is on this site, you can just grab it, steal it, and use it for your own customization. So it's this extra toolbox, this extra tool set that if we haven't thought about putting it in the product yet, you've got that there to create a bespoke solution. And then also, in combination with VMware, the guys at Rackspace, a big VMware house, we have an open API which we call iControl, based on REST. And this lets us plug into VMware or any sort of orchestration tool to give you guys flexibility and automation inside the product. So you can create your own tools to make changes to the product, monitor it, whatever you would like, or have automated processes like taking web servers in and out of production. So that coupled with the hardware, the software, how we put the security products together, and the flexibility and extensibility of the product with iRules at iControl, we think we've got a pretty compelling story inside the security space. Whew. All right, guys. So, thank you. So I think